It's funny for me to consider the cinema world as it's existed lately, and realize that moviegoers, especially within the horror and thriller camps, seem to be on a one-track mind. What I mean by that is it seems that upon exiting the movie theater, the first compulsion of those visiting cinemas are to go running straight to their phones or their social media accounts or their friends group in person and give endless word-of-mouth attention and, in fact, acclamation from what I've heard to Barbarian, this 20th Century Pictures horror film that just came out a little while ago. I'm a little late in covering this, apologies for that. But over, I'd say, for certain the last week, I think a little more beyond that, I've heard nothing but mention about this movie. In fact, it's been rolling out through YouTube advertisements, the best of which I've avoided, but I've been seeing that Barbarian has gotten very extensive word of mouth. It's a film that I would say is certainly making the rounds quite well and certainly making its presence known. I mean, even from what I've seen, I've been charmed by it. I was in fact in town the other day, and my local movie theater, as per usual, tends to post, their main posters of what's now playing on their exterior wall. And Barbarian was there, and I just give it a quick look-see, and I'm like, it looks like a very artistic horror film. Standard poster fare from what I've seen maybe in some other awards fair films that are trying to aspire to that level. But it seemed to be a very unique presentation. A poster drenched in red certainly fits with the horror scene. But upon a deeper inspection, again, I'm going to cue up the trailer in a second for those of us, maybe you're in the same position as I am and you haven't taken a look at this film yet. It has a lot of charm to it and perhaps good elements working in its favor, at least from what I can judge it. Again, film is subjective, so, I'll make up my mind when I see this movie, or even just, taking a first look at it today on what my opinion is. But again, I've heard nothing but good mention for the most part. And I would believe it based on the attributions. From a production standpoint, I don't know if because this is what the poster is specifying, I don't know if they mean a producer who worked on both It pictures. At the very least, this person worked on the 2017 Chapter 1 It movie, which was good in my opinion. And apparently an executive producer is behind this as well of The Ring. I haven't seen that film. I've heard that get good mention as well, though. The Grudge. If it's the recent one, not so much. I don't know about the older pictures, but I mean, the new one didn't seem to do very well in theaters from what I remember, or with fans generally. But you have people, whatever the case that might be with The Grudge, you have people behind the scenes who have been involved with horror before and have a repertoire in this area of cinema. But you also have talent in front of the camera that's pretty notable. I mean, some extensive filming credits as well from people that even maybe I'm unfamiliar with, more so with their work. Georgina Campbell has certainly made the rounds in, I would say, a lot of British television, so she's probably a very well-known name. In fact, I recognize it, but I couldn't pinpoint if I've ever seen her before. This may be a first introduction to her, but horror novelties. Bill Skarsgård, of course, the It attribution, who did so well in that movie as Pennywise, he's involved here, along with Justin Long from 2001's Jeepers Creepers movie. Yeah, that one came out a while back, and he's been in many projects since, but that's really where I first saw him, if I remember right. He's involved here, a couple of our big names as well. It sounds pretty interesting. And the pitch is, enticing too. It may seem a bit typical, but maybe this is an element of praiseworthy attention. If you happen to be of the case that you're not familiar with Barbarian, this is a general synopsis for you according to IMDb. A woman staying at an Airbnb discovers that the house she has rented is not what it seems. Looking at that pitch, this is obviously a very relevant horror film. It's certainly grounded in the modern era. I mean, the Airbnb affiliation, that's definitely a route to go down. I mean, a lot of people are using Airbnb as a convenience these days. But perhaps you don't necessarily know, the conditions of where you're going to be spending your time, or at least your intended downtime or vacational time. You go in expecting stuff, but usually you can't always rely on internet reviews, and so you might end up staying at a house that might be the subject of the film Barbarian. It might be more of a horror experience for you. And some people might look at that and be like, oh, we've seen that kind of before with troublesome houses, and then an unsuspecting victim comes into the scene. It might sound like typical horror fare, but the attributions here, I can't speak to Wrong Turn. I've heard of it. I haven't seen that film yet, but Don't Breathe, both movies I loved. Very strong horror releases from Sony. If you've never seen those films, I mean, they're gritty, they're thrilling, and they're beautifully executed. Wonderful thriller rides. Intense, but really good. Both rounds. Although I believe it's specifically this article I'm reading from Silver Screen Riot. I think they're specifically citing the first one. But this sounds really interesting, and there's a lot of potential with this project, at least to what I can see, and some similarities to other novel horror films out there. Let's say, for example, Jordan Peele's. This article makes a lot of things clear in that not only do you have actor-turned-director Zach Kreger, I'm pulling that quote here, I've never seen his work before, but he's pulling a Jordan Peele, and that he comes from a comedy background, and he's journeying into horror. This must be something that a lot of filmmakers, maybe people are just aspiring to be the next Jordan Peele. And it sounds like, at least from what I've heard of Barbarian for Zach Kreger, this has worked in his favor, possibly. But you also have, I really find this article interesting. If you want to read it more in depth, again, I've provided the reference for you on where that can be found. But they label a subgenre of horror, I've never heard this term before, but Detroit dystopia, and that is in conjunction as well with Don't Breathe. I find that fascinating, but I'm enticed by it. I mean, there again is a bit of a modern and relevant background to this film, so it feels very realistic, at least on the pitch. Not seeing how the execution is, but a lot of factors I can see are working in this film's favor, at least from my vantage point. Word of mouth only carries you so far. Let me judge this picture for myself. Though again, I think there's a lot of elements that are pointing to a strong horror release. At least that's what to be expected, again, from all the attribution I've heard. And this might be, again, a 20th Century Pictures film. I don't believe it's affiliated with Searchlight. Those pictures usually do very well, in my opinion, but...
This is 476 Barbary, right?
Yeah, I'm renting this place.
20th Century Pictures, by and large, does well.
Are you sure you have the right place?
Yeah. What am I supposed to do?
Why don't you come inside, and we'll call these idiots.
Crafty music choice. Let's see where this goes.
Why don't you just crash here?
Oh, no.
I don't know if you got a great look at this neighborhood, but I don't think you should be out there by yourself.
Yeah, I'd be running in the house. Or actually, I wouldn't be going in, really. I'd be like, thanks.
Tess.
I'll pass.
You take the bedroom, and I'll sleep out here on the couch.
God.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, I'd be freaked out, too.
Keith?
Strong atmosphere. Fabulous editing. I love the sound effects here. If that's employed in the movie, I'm sure it's gonna be great.
This process might seem overwhelming, but with a little practice, it can soon become a pleasurable experience. This is perfectly natural.
Is it? Maybe to this house. Poor woman. I mean, we've seen this type of general story before if unsuspecting victim gets caught in a bad situation, right? That's the subject of many thrillers these days. And I am much more, as I've stated in the past, a thriller person. I have a lot of conditions when it comes to horror movies. You know, for example, I'm not always... It depends on the case, and it depends on the extent. If it's like torture porn, it doesn't really entice me. But, you know, when it comes to excessive gore and stuff like that, like anything Saw level, I usually tend to avoid. But maybe if it's done more artistically and more of it's more subtle and well crafted, I'm a little more open. On the second note with horror films, like the supernatural side, especially what happens these days, it's a real mainstay in horror films, especially in the past couple of years. Those I tend to avoid as a Christian. I kind of just have, it's not necessarily a feeling I wish to entertain. The horror atmosphere, though, I love. And I am open, when I say supernatural, paranormal stories I'm much looser on. But thriller films are really my go-to. They're a favorite genre of mine. I just love the scary atmosphere, a very unsettling experience. And this certainly is. Although it's a beautiful introduction, I thought. I mean, very crafty. And there are a lot of trailers that try to, mess with the audience in regard to your emotions. You go into the lead-in experience thinking, oh, this is like some sort of burgeoning romance. Ironically, she just happens upon the wrong house, right? Wrong address. Meets what appears to be a nice, congenial man. Seems, to be somewhat decent, at least on first appearances. It's a nice house, by the way, at least on first introduction. I mean, at least I take a look and going, hey, if this is the Airbnb, or at least the house is mistaken for it, it's a pretty place. But if it were me, I'd be like, I'm going to go check out the address. I tend to be a bit more cautious, right? But she is too. I like the scene here of her shooting the license. Like, okay, let's do a background check. That's great. But when that kicks off, the sound effects are good. If that matches what's present in the trailer for the film production, no wonder people have found a real home with this movie in regard to thriller fans. I think it's a strong debut. Even from a first trailer, there's real mystery to it. They obviously don't answer all the questions here. That's for you to enjoy and relish when you watch the film. It's a bit of a curious release, but as somebody who, again, really enjoyed Don't Breathe, and the atmosphere, I love confined thrillers. So that film on that level, and the fact that they utilized the entire space so well for both entries, really appealed to me. It took place in a very small house, if you've never seen the movie, but they really made use of it. Like, every space just felt so well utilized. And I can see the potential here as well. Different approach, maybe different direction. Different plot, of course. But enticing. It looks like a very strong thriller film. I can see why it's gotten good word of mouth, at least on a tease. I'm definitely going to enjoy watching it for myself when I check it out, I'm sure. If it's anything like this trailer. It's very welcoming for a thriller fan. What are your guys' thoughts, though, with Barbarian? If you have seen the movie at this point, because again, I'm covering it a bit late, I would ask that you don't post spoilers down below. I'm going to try my best to maybe see it in theaters if I can manage it. If not, I'll see it as soon as possible. I don't know. Who's this coming out from as a studio? I'm trying to think maybe if it is... These days, streaming is a nice convenience if you can't make it to the theater. If something comes up, and that's been a case for me quite a bit. Okay, this is coming out from 20th Century. I'd expect a Hulu debut, maybe. I don't know. Most of the previously Fox film fare tends to be shelved over to Hulu, especially the Searchlight stuff. Maybe this one will make it around. I don't think it'll end up like on Disney Plus or anything. Ideally, you'd be seeing it in theaters. I'm going to try my best to make it. We'll see what happens in the future, but it looks good. Maybe you have a different interpretation on it, though. Maybe you have a totally different take than I do. Feel free to let me know your thoughts down below on it. But in terms of like a first introduction, I can see why it's getting good word of mouth. It's a good tease, and one that definitely lures me in. I want to see more of this poor, unsuspecting victim go through hell, essentially, in this bad or I guess mistaken Airbnb, because it doesn't seem like the right address. Or no, maybe it is. It's an inviting thriller, right? If there's any moral lesson to be learned here as well, be careful where you go. Be careful whose houses you sign up to stay at. Maintain a safety bubble around you, or you could be this woman. I think this is going to appeal to horror fans and thriller fans, at least from what I can see. It looks good. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.